Now guys, I've filmed this video multiple times this morning. I've been paying attention to signals all morning to try to bring you the best information. I think the best thing I can do for you after going through it a few times, really trying to give both sides is just give it to you blunt up front right at the beginning of the video. We are most likely heading into a collapse here, like a serious collapse of the SPY of markets of multiple different stocks, Nvidia, and I'm going to show all of you guys the reasons for that, and I'm really not going to sugarcoat it today. I think it's really important because I think you're at one of those pivotal moments where this downturn can happen. I still think we have potential for March of 2025. I think we have potential for October of 2025 because the market can remain irrational for longer than you can keep shorting it, right? So it'll take all your money if you keep trying to short it, but we pay attention to key moments. Do we have one of those key moments right now? I believe we could form one, and we're going to talk about that because I think December and January are really what you need to be paying attention to, because this is our first moment where we can really see a big downturn and maybe even get some kind of complete collapse, and I want you to be aware of it. So let's get into it. The first thing I wanted to talk about was, as an investor, if I'm looking at this and being like, oh yeah, I want to get all in. And I'm noticing this on Twitter a lot of people saying, even about like GameStop, they're hoping Ryan Cohen is buying Bitcoin at 100K. And that's just the silliest thing I've ever heard, because do you know what most great investors are known to do? Well, they buy low and sell high. So I wanted to really explain how this is a high in a much different way on the investment portion, because technically if you invested at the right time at these low levels, right, buying at lows, and then you end up going to highs and you actually, hey, maybe make a decision, right? But is this one of those times? No, it looks like the complete opposite. And how I wanted to talk about this was, you have a MACD. You're talking about selling at the highs. You have a MACD that is at the highest point that it has ever seen in our history. The highest point on a MACD in history. And people are going to be convinced to put hundreds of thousands of dollars in now. No, you are much better off to wait for the move down, and even moving sideways or seeing that actually see a minor pullback like we did in here on a weekly scale to take an upside play at this point for the investment side of things. I just really want to explain this as one of the basic things is buy low, sell high, and you have a MACD at the highest point that it has ever been in history right now. Doesn't that kind of sound like a high? If you really bring it down to common sense, you're kind of like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I probably will save my cash and maybe look for an opportunity in the future. And you might have to wait a couple of years for that to happen, but you can benefit so much more from doing that, right? We could benefit so much more when we hit the first highest point that we ever hit in history, to wait for that to play out and see that confirm that it wants to go higher and then make a decision. And that ended up being a good one, and now you're seeing another moment just like the last one. And are you going to be convinced by the media that tells you that the stock market is really good and stocks are really good? Of course they are going to say that when you are at all-time highs. Of course they are going to be saying that when you have the highest point on the MACD ever reached. Now, shorter time frames, we will go into those on Sunday. We can always make the moves higher. That's the important part, seeing how long this can leak out and paying attention to weakness. But this was a bad downturn. We're at the highest point on the MACD in history. So do we see weakness in this area? And the simple answer is yes, you do. And you see it almost identical to the last time. Now, we've talked about this before, so we're just going to do it briefly. You see the divergence there. We had triple divergence up here. When did it become a problem? Was when that divergence became significant. Once it got significant and we confirmed it, we ended up heading down for a very long time. God, I love bear markets. I hope we get one. Now, what do we notice that is comparable to the now? We have a bunch of those divergences again, and guess what? On your RSI, it is getting significant. So if we experience something bad in December, this could be more than just a pullback. This could be more than just a correction. And that's why it's important to look even deeper, right? On the macro scale, the lowest chart I like to go into is a daily chart. And if this weekly is going to curl over, I should see weakness in the daily. And this is where I think you have time. I think we do have time to see one more, especially if we can correct now. So barring some kind of black swan event, I think the likelihood here is we are going to see a very obvious divergence on the SPY. And the reason for that is because we've seen it almost, I think, every single time in history. I just showed you that previous high. We saw it there. So why can't we see it now? And I think that is what I want to pay attention to. The fact that next week, I think we actually might see some turbulence. That could be interesting, because if we just keep going up, that makes me even more worried, to be honest. But maybe we're able to buy more time in the future. I'm looking for the signal to start the domino effect, where the daily starts to confirm divergence, the weekly starts to confirm divergence, and then the monthly, in the grand scheme of things, starts to turn down. That's what I'm paying attention to with what I'm talking about right now. And you don't have that. And we talked about that a lot. We talked about it here. Hey, it can go make that divergence. If it doesn't, or it violates it, we most likely bought ourselves some time. So what do you notice? Well, the RSI came just a little bit higher than this point, violating it, totally making it void at this point. And we notice that the MACD is rather flat, if not slightly up as well. So we do not have those signals right now. So if we can see those signals anywhere in December or January, I really want to be paying attention, because this could curl down for a moment, curl back up, and then give us that significant divergence on the daily scale that tells us, uh-oh, we need to be careful in December, or maybe it pops up in January. Because of the weekly signals, we want to be very, very aware of this happening. And then we always want to be open to a weekly able to turn back up into positive territory, especially if we remain in this channel. So the main part of this is we do not have that daily weakness. So any pullback you see can be just that. It can be some kind of pullback. Maybe it pulls back into the 20. Right? Because we use the 20 a lot, especially as we test top Bollinger. You will notice that there are many, many times where you go to top Bollinger, you pull back down to the 20, you retest off of it, and you head back up to test top Bollinger. And then what do you need to do to go higher? You most likely need to see a tag of that 20 before you can head higher. And guess what? By the end of December, you could have that signal. Now I'm going to run through it with the Qs just a little bit quicker, but I shouldn't see the same things that I see on the SPY. If it's not going to prove for the Qs, then it most likely won't happen in the SPY. And we're noticing that the Qs are what they are at. Again, the highest point that they've seen in history for the MACD. So as far as an investor goes, if I use common sense, I go, that is technically the high of highs right now. So do I really want to be piling in at these levels, or do I want to be paying attention in case there is weakness? Well, that's where you got to make a decision. We notice that the weekly here, if we're not going to see something bad happen, then we most likely won't see a similar signal to the SPY. We most likely will not see a signal that is similar to the past. Well, if we look at the weekly scale, we can notice that, we did have those signals in the past, and it looks a lot like that right now. And isn't it for now, right now, more significant? If we get rid of that significance, then that's a different story, right? But right now it is, so I'm going to pay attention to any time I see weakness, and we're already heading to a monthly expected move, and a lot of stocks are outside of their monthly expected moves with 68% chances to drop by almost 10% in some of them, and we're only, as of this video, 7 days into the month of December. So by the end of December, a lot can change. But what I'm noticing here is we have divergence all across the top, very obvious, but when do we pay attention? When it starts to become significant. And that's what you have here. You have a significant divergence now set up for the Qs on the weekly scale. That is saying that the monthly has a very good shot to turn down soon. When that does confirm, that's when that is saying the monthly has a good shot to turn down. Now we'll notice here that in order for the weekly to turn down, I really want to see weakness in the daily. And do I see that weakness, or do I see us with just one first point here? Well, we have violated the divergences very cleanly for the Qs here on the RSI, and we're looking very flat on the MACD. So that can be some kind of reversal, but it is more likely, as the SPY doesn't have those signals, to turn down and then maybe even see a lower high like the last time, or come and make that divergence outside of a monthly expected move. And this is what I would be watching out for. We just saw on every single chart what held true for the SPY held true for the Qs. It looked like the past, and it looks similar to the SPY, so we should be open to major weakness for the Qs. And weirdly enough, the Qs on the weekly scale, if you really look at this, has more significant divergence than the SPY. So I would be very, very cautious with my tech stocks if I was an investor. There are some points to pay attention to when it comes to the other indices. That would be IWM, and I'm going to use DIA for the Dow Jones. And we notice that we've actually confirmed daily divergence for IWM. Make sure you tune in and you're subscribed for Sunday's video. We do give out weekly expected moves for the SPY and the Qs, and IWM actually looks pretty tight and looks like it could get some kind of move. So we'll pay attention to that, but it has confirmed almost a double top divergence here. We can see that is very significant on your RSI, which can curl down weekly charts. Now the weekly here, it's holding on the RSI, not the MACD at the same time, so that's something different with IWM. But I just wanted to show you how there is weakness right now, and we could get some kind of reaction up from this next week, so just pay attention. But if this is confirmed, you always have to be open to, hey, this thing can keep dropping with that confirmation. As we pull over to the DIA, you're going to notice as well, and sometimes these do lead the market, and this one is very interesting because you do have the divergence very clean here, flat on the RSI, but it's not on the MACD at the same time, and it's just flat on the RSI. So who's to say that DIA can't turn down for a moment and then curl back up into positive territory, as it has so much room to the center line and you don't have the divergence on the MACD. We might go make that significant divergence, and right as everyone gets bullish, and this is what's funky in the market right now. Consumer sentiment is going up, but we're noticing not a lot of greed technically in the market, which means we can probably keep squeezing, but it means not a lot of greed in the market. People are very fearful right now, so some kind of move down can make them feel justified, and then when that whips back around, they might go, oh crap, okay, this thing's just going to remain bullish forever. And it is right when they get that psychological thing to happen that you can see something bad happen. If this look pops up at the end of December or going into January, I will be paying very close attention to it, and I definitely will be going into a heavy set of cash. Something on cash, because I just said, hey, that's what I'll most likely go into, is the daily is still positive in positive territory. We noticed the reversal signals happening on Friday and Thursday into Friday, and that proved to be right. So we were correct on that bounce for the dollar for Friday. And does this have a bad signal that can say, hey, people are about to fly to the dollar really, really fast? Well, guess what? It's the opposite signal from that great investment that the SPY looks like it is. I'm trolling. It looks bad. But we notice that the monthly here is something to pay attention to, because the dollar bottoms before the market tops. And there's another point to make about the dollar here, which is the lows. The lows of 2021 going into 2022, we actually do notice the dollar bottomed before the market topped. And then we went into January of 2022. That is when the turbulence started. So I just want you to notice that we're bottoming before the market has topped. And this, when it does cross, we can still buy ourselves a few months. We noticed that over here. It took like 5 or 6 months before that difference actually came to fruition. But the dollar bottomed, and now we can see that happen again, where the dollar is bottoming here, and if it crosses up on this monthly MACD, you have the dollar going up on a monthly scale. That would be people flying into cash, and it will catch up to the market eventually, and you've already seen, you're going into the third month of seeing that as the market heads higher. So pay attention. The other point to make about this level right here is notice that we have not come back down to those levels. So people like Warren Buffett, people who are really good investors, they most likely are still holding a higher amount of cash because they are very weary of this market right now. And I think you should be too. This is just easy proof that, hey, the SPY has the opposite signal that could happen, the monthly turn down, right as the dollar has the potential to turn up, meaning people are going to go into cash and out of stocks. And when that does catch up, well, the dollar bottoms first, the SPY is going to top next. Now, if you've been joining my live streams, what is something I keep saying about volatility over the last few streams is I think this thing needs to get down to 12.12. When you get down to 12.12, that's where you see big reactions in volatility. That is where you will see people really get greedy. They will get complacent. And so I think we need to make some kind of move to get there, unless we're going to experience some kind of black swan. So what I think we need to see is something very similar to right over here. Back in May 2024, I really want to pay attention to this because we saw that volatility really shoot higher from that. And you'll notice we had to get tight, and then then we saw some divergences pop up, and that's when something bad happened. And we just talked about how the SPY could create divergences. Well, it'll be an even better tick if volatility can make those divergences as well down by 12.12. If we can make divergences down at 12.12, we see a reaction from volatility soon, and we get that divergence for the SPY at the same time, and we start to see this kind of look, I would be watching out, because that means volatility is most likely coming back into this market, and it is here to stay. Now, if we look at the monthly chart, you're going to notice that where is that as of right now as I delete those drawings? It is still in negative territory. So we haven't even seen the monthly go positive here yet, and that's very important. I highly, highly doubt the monthly is going to be able to cross here. I more so think we are going to see a reaction down and then get some kind of volatility to come up over time, and that will cause some big problems as volatility is actually able to go positive. So that's what I'd be paying attention to for volatility. My theory here is that getting down to 12.12, getting people really complacent, getting people overly greedy is the goal. And if we get some kind of drop that then is able to be saved, and we see a big boom from that drop, and we make those divergences, people might be caught exactly at the top, which is the psychological thing that they want to do to you guys. We will stay aware of these things and keep you on notice what is shaping up if these things are playing out. So make sure you're subscribed. Just to do a couple more, just to show you some stocks that are saying, hey, I'm probably not a good investment at this point. I'm going to pull up Nvidia, and I want you to see how this is the highest point that it's ever hit on the MACD. And the whole strategy, if you really want to go down to basics, it's buy low and sell high. Well, you are at the highest point this MACD has ever seen for Nvidia on the monthly scale. This would be the definition of buying high if I invest in these areas. The better areas are to buy at the low and make hundreds of % on this bad boy, and that's what we really want to be paying attention to. The last time it was at its highest point on the MACD, what ended up happening? Bad things. Now, do I see bad signals here for Nvidia to turn down on the weekly scale? Well, let's look at the weekly and see, ooh, that confirmed last week. Now, there is a hiccup in this. So we've been pointing out the fact that there was divergence here, and that could lead to a pullback. The reason we said pullback back in these areas, back when we were making these videos, we always say, be aware that that could drop more, but most likely the probable thing is that's going to be a pullback. And we saw those divergences in here that really helped us. Nvidia has been great to us. It's even given us the same signal like almost every single month, and hopefully it does it again because it's played out 100% of the time. So we do notice that that was not at the same time on the MACD. It was just on the RSI. Now you have it on the MACD, now you have it on the RSI at the same time. It does not mean we can't make one more move higher up on the daily or something like that. It just means if this is confirmed, then I want to be paying attention, because we can have monthly weakness. It is enough to convince me as an investor to not be in Nvidia anymore. That is what that signal tells me, and I'm just telling you what these indicators are saying, and then saying how I like to react when I see those things happen. All I do is let the indicators do it for me, and then I push the buttons. Here's what happens. Well, what we need to see is a good confirmation of this weekly crossing down. You do have the red blip, that's a good hint, but notice it is on a overall positive bar. Okay, so it's on a positive bar, it's not below the 9-week moving averages. We've seen a lot of these moments actually in the year of 2024, which is very fishy for MACD behavior, but we'll notice that if we want this to actually show weakness, we need that to get a red bar. A bad closing below the 9-week moving average would be important. So we're going to pay attention to this, and we have weekly expected moves that we're going to update you with on Patreon on Sunday. Now, Meta is another one I wanted to talk about. First of all, on the monthly scale, this one's going to be good with the daily. On the monthly scale, is Meta a good investment? Well, if the theory is buy low and sell high, well, Meta is at the highest point that it has ever been, ever in history on the MACD. Doesn't that sound a little bit like a high, like buying high, right? So maybe selling at the high would be a better thing. Now, I want to point out that the weekly scale here did have divergence, and that completed. The only problem that I had with this divergence, and why we always talked about those reactions, was one, the signals in here, and two, the daily scale didn't necessarily have weakness. So we can see that next curl up. If you go back to 2022, the top of the Qs in 2022, you're going to notice a blip exactly like this one, and it made one more turn up and then failed. So it made a different divergence point where this was able to curl up on a weekly, and then it actually showed that divergence later on. And that is something I'd really pay attention to here for Meta, and that's going to make a lot more sense because the daily looks like it could still be in some kind of ABC type move, especially as this breaks out. Now, Meta is kind of saying two things here on the daily scale, so I want you to pay attention because Meta is saying things for next week. If Meta experiences weakness and that weakness continues and we drop down on this daily and we cross through that MACD, it is going to be a massive problem. That is going to be a big problem because that is showing major weakness while also potential to confirm back down or reject on the weekly scale. So pay attention. Now, if we are still in some kind of ABC move, we might see a retest, see this go higher, end up seeing that divergence later on in some way up here for Meta. But Meta, I think it is one of the worst investments right now of 2025. Another thing I wanted to talk about was Bitcoin. Bitcoin actually showing flat, if not slightly down diverges. Now that is forming. I am not in any way super bearish on Bitcoin. I think this thing could see some craziness for a while now, but I want to be aware if this starts to turn down right now. So the weekly scale is important. You're noticing that the monthly is way up there at this point. We've gotten rid of a lot of the divergence that says, hey, this is going to be some kind of crash, but it doesn't mean that it can't see a monthly pullback that ends up curling up into positive territory. Now, this is still curled up. It can just keep going. I just want to be aware of the opportunity. And if it's showing me a weekly divergence now, then I might want to pay attention to this for the next few weeks. I might want to go into a daily scale and just say, hey, I know there's divergence on the weekly now. Awesome. Do I see daily weakness? And the fact of the matter is, no, you do not, but you could very soon. All Bitcoin has to do to show weakness here is get everyone excited above 100K, find some kind of top up here and curl down. That would give you enough to say, hey, there is weakness in this overall move. I actually think Bitcoin has the opportunity to see some kind of move down to really shake some people out again, even with the little flash crash moment, or just keep moving sideways, really keep piling up, get close to that center line, and then see that curl up. I think something like this would be good, and then you curl up into positive territory and set some kind of trap for Bitcoin. Now, that's something that would say Bitcoin is going to follow the market if we make all these signals. If Bitcoin doesn't follow the market and people still see it as almost the savior in this point, then that thing can just keep turning up. So you want to make sure these are confirmed. But I just wanted to show that Bitcoin itself can show weakness here, and I think you need to be paying attention to it. I don't believe, even on the weekly though, that this is the strongest signal. I think this is a flat divergence on the top. So I am open completely to coming down to some kind of lower level or a retest and then ending up seeing this thing go higher over time for Bitcoin. Just to make it nice and simple at the end here, as we give the main takeaway, I think you're really looking for weakness in the daily scale. You see it in the weekly. You see that the monthly is not a good investment. So you want to be paying attention to weakness for when that monthly can give you that opportunity. We're noticing that the daily scale does not have it as we violated a lot of the divergence. So if we see some kind of drawdown, I think this is the look you're looking for going forward. And I could look for that in Meta. I could look for that in Nvidia. I could look for that in the Qs. I could look for that in DIA. I could look for that in IWM. There's a lot of options here to look for, and they're all kind of shaping up to be almost at the same time while the dollar is seriously bottoming. So you have to be open to this moment being in the very near future, and also be open to, hey, if all of this even plays out, what if we make reversal signals here and we correct and this goes into further into 2025? I'm talking March of 2025 or even October of 2025. This can leak out for way longer than you think, but I think you are at a time where this could end in complete collapse, and one of those moments is right now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you had a good time. I hope that you guys were having a good weekend and this just gave you a little blip, and you guys can come back tomorrow and get those shorter time frames, get the updated weekly expected moves. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. You guys are fantastic. Peace out.